Hola, and welcome back to Beyond the Office, the show where we delve deep into the intricate world of building and developing remote teams. I'm your host, Bill Keller, and I'm back in Medellin, Colombia after moving back to the States about 4 months ago. It's great to be back. If you've never been here, it's an amazing city and an amazing country. Today, we're exploring the fascinating subject of business decision-making. Is the logic we apply to our business decision-making really as sound as we think? Or are there hidden layers of complexity we're missing? For this episode, I was inspired by some fascinating insights from a book I'm reading called Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. Rory talks about how things might seem illogical at first glance, but can sometimes be effective solutions. And that's what we're going to dissect today, how our perceptions of logic can sometimes lead us astray, especially when it comes to hiring talent from around the globe. While we'll be focusing on global teams, these ideas can be used just as easily in such diverse subjects as adopting AI or changing comp incentive plans in your company. Let's start by painting a picture with Rory's interesting concept of an XY axis that helps us to visualize our business decisions. Imagine everything above the X axis are things that are logical, and everything that below that seems a little bit weird or counterintuitive. Now you have the y-axis. That divides our actions to things that work and things that don't work. And throughout our episodes today, we'll be using this framework to explore where global staffing fits into these quadrants. And the thing I find unique about global staffing is, depending upon your viewpoint, it can fit into each one of these quadrants. So let's go back and we talk about everything above the x-axis are things that are logical. Everything below are things that are illogical or might be weird. And everything on one side of the y-axis are things that work and things that don't work. And so when we think about this, we have up here in this axis, let's say this is things that are logical and that work. But and global staffing certainly fits into that. I know that because I've seen it happen. But for other people, it could be illogical and work. For other companies, it could be illogical and it doesn't work. And for other companies still, it could be logical and it doesn't work. And so that's what's very unique about this subject, is it can fall into all four of these quadrants depending upon your viewpoint. And that's what we're going to delve deeper into. I understand it might be a confusing concept at first, but one of the things in Rory's book that he really talks about is we generally focus only on this one quadrant, which is the things that work that are logical. But there's also this whole other quadrant down here, things that are illogical that work. And that's where the magic happens. That's where the alchemy, as his book is called, really makes a difference. That's what he's really talking about. How can we find things that might seem at first illogical that can help us to take our businesses to the next level? And that's where most people aren't looking for these new ideas. And that's why there's opportunity there. But first, why does this matter? Well, many businesses today still cling to the idea that hiring locally is inherently better, supporting local jobs, having more control, and a litany of other reasons. Yet these same businesses often don't think twice about buying products made overseas. It's a fascinating contradiction, isn't it? This contradiction is the starting point for our journey today into the logic, or perhaps illogic, behind our business decisions. We'll be diving into common apprehensions about global staffing, language barriers, cultural differences, time zones, you name it. Are these concerns sufficient to shy away from the substantial benefits that global workforce can offer? Or are we letting our fears and misconceptions cloud our judgment, potentially missing out on significant opportunities for growth and innovation? So whether you're a business owner, a team leader, or just someone curious about the mechanics of decision-making, stay tuned. We're about to unravel some of the complexities behind the choices we make in business, and maybe, just maybe, we'll discover that the world offers more logical solutions than we initially perceived, if only we're willing to look beyond the office. Global staffing, a topic surrounded by numerous preconceptions and emotional reactions, can be a polarizing issue. Let's explore these not to persuade, but to understand and reflect. When considering global staffing, several concerns frequently surface, influencing how businesses decide where and how to hire. These concerns include communication barriers, fears that language differences will lead to misunderstandings or errors. Cultural differences, concerns that diverse cultural norms could lead to conflict or misaligned work ethics. Time zone challenges, the logistical complication of managing teams across various time zones. Quality of work, the assumption that remote teams might not deliver the same standards expected of local teams. Security concerns, anxiousness over data security and privacy when working across international borders. Legal and compliance issues, the complexity of navigating international labor laws and standards. Employee engagement, worries that remote workers won't feel connected to a company's core mission and values. Client perception, the fear that clients might view outsourcing negatively, assuming it means lower quality or attention. And reliability and accountability, doubts about the reliability of overseas workers and the challenges of managing their performance from afar. And you might even have more to add to that list. The thing is, all of these issues are true, but what's also true is it's not the whole truth. And that's where I think people get it wrong. In Andy Anders's book, The Bottom of the Pool, he brings up this idea that something can be true, but not the truth. And what he uses as an illustration is when he was a kid in the pool, all of his friends would swim out to the deep end and they would go into the water and then try to swim up out of the pool to see how high they could get. And the person that got the highest was the winner. And they found out there was a limit to how high they could go. But what they found was when they swam to the bottom of the pool, something that was counterintuitive at the time, they could push off of the bottom and get much higher than they could ever get before. And that was the truth. And I find that global staffing fits into this bucket as well. People focus on what they know is true, but not on the truth. And in there lies the issue. There are all of these negatives about global staffing, but almost all of these negatives can be turned around into positives, or these negatives can be managed with proper management and systems. Some will say, I should not have to work that hard, but those people would not be innovators. If you want to be an innovator and you want to do something different, you're sometimes going to have to work harder than you think you should. So you want to know the truth with a capital T? Working with people, no matter where they are in the world, involves problems. I've had some big fails working with people overseas. I've had some even bigger fails working with domestic staff. Because I understand that if I want to do great things for myself and my business, I will need to work with and through people. And even with the bad experiences, it would not keep me from hiring overseas or domestically. So as you consider the decisions you're making for your business, I encourage you to weigh both the potential benefits and the challenges. It's not about whether global staffing or any other issue at hand is good or bad, but it's about aligning with your specific business needs and goals. Reflect on your own biases and fears that could be clouding your judgment. Or are they pointing you towards valid concerns that need addressing before taking the next step? Next, we're going to talk about the concept from behavioral economics called satisficing. This term describes a decision-making process where instead of pursuing the best possible option, individuals and businesses settle for what's good enough. Why discuss satisficing in the context of global staffing? Because it opens up a broader conversation about the criteria we use to define what's good enough. And it challenges us to think about whether we're making choices based on or through analysis or just sticking to the comfort of familiar solutions. Let's consider the typical reasons businesses might avoid global staffing, which can often be traced back to satisficing behaviors. Comfort with the status quo. It's easier to work with and who we know. Perceived simplicity. Local hiring seems less complex at first glance. Immediate needs over long-term strategy. Quick solutions to staffing shortages might overshadow long-term benefits from a more diverse global team. And then risk aversion. There's a natural tendency to avoid the unknown, especially when it involves new processes or cultural differences. At first glance, satisficing seems like not such a good thing when you think of the points mentioned above, but in reality, for many of us, we're not picking the best option because trying to find the best option, whether real or perceived, might add a higher degree of risk or variability into the process. So if we do what we've always done, it might not be great, but at least it won't be crap. And that makes sense depending upon your goals, doesn't it? Satisficing is in large part a strategy not to have to make a decision. If we do what we've always done, the decision's already been made. If things are not great, or they don't work out, it's hard to get blamed for running with a decision that is normal or one that's been made by a predecessor. But here's where we pivot in our thinking. Instead of suggesting that one approach is inherently better, let's use these points as a springboard for deeper reflection. How often do your decision-making process favor the familiar over potentially more effective alternatives? Are there opportunities you might be missing due to the preference for a path of least resistance? I'll give you a real-life example of where I think the strategy of satisficing has failed. It has not just failed the company, but their clients and also their employees. I'm an investor in several companies, and one of the companies that I invest in uses a local accounting firm, or did use a local accounting firm, for their bookkeeping. The problem was that they're having a hard time finding good bookkeepers. That's the accounting firm. We were getting our books sometimes 2 and 3 months late, and it was difficult for us to make business decisions because of that. But not only that, there were mistakes as well. They were always advertising for help, and knowing firsthand some of the internal issues they were having, I thought that our solution of using global staff could be a great solution for them. Because of the struggles they were having finding good help, this put immense pressure on some of their great staff. And in the end, I presented our solution, and several of the partners and staff members were excited about the possibility. But in the end, they decided to stick with what they knew. Because of their satisficing, we ended up leaving the company, taking our business somewhere else, because we weren't getting what we needed in the end. One of the key employees left because they weren't getting what they needed, and the company wasn't getting the support they need, and they're still advertising to this day and still struggling to find the help they need, all because they were trying to do what they've always known. There are times when satisficing might be a good strategy, but there are others where it can be practically catastrophic to a business. So I ask you the question, are there areas where you might be satisficing? Could a willingness to reassess and possibly embrace a more diverse solution drive your company forward? The goal here is not to prescribe, but to provoke thought to help you to decide the best path forward based on and through an honest evaluation of all the available options. Let's move into what I call the toolbox paradox. This is where businesses that have a variety of tools at their disposal, like global staffing when they're considering staffing, but hesitate to use them. But why? While we're focusing on global staffing, you could just as easily insert AI or automation or any other business process that people have decided not to use for some reason or another. Why do we ignore certain tools in our toolbox? It's a question that brings us to the heart of how businesses make decisions. We would like to think that it's logic, but Rory in his book talks about this idea of post-rationalization. We really make decisions emotionally and subconsciously, and then post-rationalize the decision after the fact, with logical answers such as the fear of the unknown, past experiences, perceived complexity, or any of the other challenges we talked about in the beginning. Studies show that our subconscious is making our decision for us up to 10 seconds before we're even aware that a decision has been made. Crazy, I know, but what does this mean? To me, it means we're not in as much control of our decisions as we think. Since we are meaning-loving beings, our mind will come in after the decision has already been made and fill in all of the logical reasons that we made the decision in the first place. So while we're thinking we're being logical, it's really emotion disguised as logic. I will give you an example that might help to illustrate this point. Let's say you took your car to the mechanic and it was making a noise, and the mechanic diagnosed the issue and tells you that it's going to take 10 hours to fix and cost around $2,000. You go back to him and say, "That's a long time. Why does it take so long?" Well, there's a tool that we could use and it would shorten the time by 5 hours. So then you'd probably ask him, so you don't have that tool? If they would come back to you and say, well, we have the tool, we just don't like to use it. It's a little heavy, sometimes it's a little hard to use, and the tool's only made in China, and we prefer to use US tools here in the shop. At this point, if your head hasn't already exploded, you'd probably just go and tell the mechanic, I don't care how you feel, or if you think you have good reasons for not using the tool, just use it and save me the $1,000. So why is it so easy to see the absurdity in this illustration, but can be so difficult in our own situations? I think the answer is perspective. Since as the car owner, we see the decision not to use the tool as hurting us, whereas the mechanic, while he might have some good reasons, perhaps his subconscious knows that if he doesn't use the tool, it'll make him an extra $1,000. The mind is a curious thing. Rory talks about this in his book, that perhaps it's better if we don't know the exact reasons for our decisions. Perhaps it protects us in some way, but I contend it hurts us in others. As you think about your own toolbox, I encourage you to consider what tools you might be overlooking due to biases or past experiences. How can a more authentic, balanced evaluation of those tools propel your business forward? What are the techniques that we can use to help us to overcome this issue? One is reframing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. As we move on through our conversation, we're next going to talk about Decision making under uncertainty. It's a scenario where the best choices aren't clear, outcomes are unpredictable, and yet decisions still need to be made. I think it's what we call life. Uncertainty can significantly affect our choices, often more than we realize. In the realm of global staffing, this uncertainty might stem from not knowing how a remote team will perform, how cultural differences will impact the operation, or what the long-term benefits of such an arrangement will be. Let's explore some of the key concepts from behavioral economics that will shed light on how we handle uncertainty. The first is loss aversion. This principle suggests that the pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. In business, this means companies might avoid global staffing because of the risk of poor outcome feel more significant than the potential gains. The second is ambiguity aversion. Often businesses prefer an option with a known probability of success, even if it's low, over the option where success could be greater, but the probabilities are unknown. This can lead to choosing local hires over global ones simply because the outcomes feel more predictable. And then you have the status quo bias. This is a bias that leads us to prefer things that stay the same by doing nothing or maintaining a current or previous decision. It's a major reason that businesses stick with local staffing despite the availability of potentially better alternatives globally. How can businesses overcome these biases? It starts with acknowledging them. Recognizing these mental blocks is the first steps towards making an informed, rational decision. Here are a few strategies we can use to help us. 1. Scenario planning. By developing detailed scenarios for how global staffing could play out, including best case, worst case, and most likely scenarios, this can help us quantify uncertainties and make them more manageable. The second are pilot programs. I recommend this all the time. Before fully committing, run a small-scale pilot project with a global team. This reduces the perceived risk by allowing the business to test the waters with minimal investment. The third is incremental integration. Gradually integrating global staff into a business operation rather than switching all at once. This allows adjustment and learning at manageable stages, reducing the fear associated with big changes. This fourth strategy is a little unconventional, and it might not be able to take advantage of it just because of cost reasons, but it can be powerful, and it is hiring more people at one time. This is a strategy that Rory talks about in his book if you find yourself leaning towards the predictable. While in his illustration he was talking about buying a car or home, I think that it fits well here. So if you're going to buy a house, what type of house would it be? Most of us would likely buy an average house to fit most of our needs. Close to our work, but close to school. However, if you can have two different houses, they would likely be wildly different in terms of style, location, and layout. The extra options allow us to make choices that fit the extents of our lives rather than just the average of our lives. And the same can happen in business if we want to increase diversity in people, ideas, and choosing more at one time allows us to break out of the safe mold because we often get to pick the person we think we need, but then we can also pick other people and other options to give us and take us to the extents of what we could use in the business, which often leads to more diversity. So as we navigate the complexities of decision making under uncertainty, remember that stepping out of our comfort zone, even slightly, can lead to discoveries that significantly alter our businesses for the better. The key is not to avoid uncertainty, but to manage it wisely, allowing your business to grow and adapt in ways you might never have considered if you had stayed in the confines of certainty. As we round out today's discussion on decision-making and global staffing, let's focus on a powerful technique that can change the entire landscape of how we make decisions, and that is reframing. Reframing is about changing the context in which the problem is perceived. It's not just seeing the glass as half full instead of half empty. It's understanding that the glass can be refilled. When it comes to decision making, whether it is global staff or some other business issue, reframing can help us to see beyond the immediate challenges and appreciate the potential long-term benefits. Let's look at some practical ways to reframe our thoughts. A powerful reframe that I heard recently is, if I gave you $10 million, would you take it? Of course, you might say, but there's one condition. If you take it, you won't wake up tomorrow. Unless you have a death wish, your decision is most likely changed. So you're saying waking up tomorrow is more valuable than $10 million. That's powerful. How would you change your life if you understood that and you lived that every day? We can reframe the issues in our lives, and we can do the same thing for our businesses. Here are a couple powerful reframes for our businesses that you might be able to use when considering any issue or global staffing for that matter. The first reframe is from cost to investment. Instead of viewing global staffing merely as a cost-saving measure, reframe it as an investment in accessing a broader talent pool and enhancing global reach. This perspective encourages us to think about returns in innovation, diversity of ideas, and giving our businesses a competitive advantage. The second reframe is from risk to opportunity. Shift the focus on the risks of cultural differences and logistical challenges to seeing these as opportunities for innovation and learning. Embracing diversity can lead to creative solutions and new market insights that weren't possible before. The third reframe is from exploitation to collaboration. When I first started working overseas and I told people what I was doing, it was kind of like, oh, so you've decided to exploit people. But nothing could be further from the truth. For me, nothing could be further from the truth. But for some, this idea lingers because, again, it can be true, but it doesn't have to be the truth. I have a twofold mission in life: to provide people with opportunities and to help them to grow. One of the things that I love about working overseas is I believe I can make an outsized difference compared to working here in the United States. The people overseas are hungry for leadership, training, and guidance. These are things that we might take for granted here in the United States, but they're not as common overseas. Yes, it's true, if you're hiring overseas, you have to be careful because you're coming from a position of power, and that can be abused. But I think the great reframe here is that this is not exploitation if done correctly. It's collaboration. People from around the world helping us to build our businesses as we help them build their careers, provide for their families, and help them reach their full potential. I encourage you to think about how you can reframe your own challenges and decisions. What aspects of your business could benefit from a fresh perspective? How might changing your viewpoint open up new paths to success that you hadn't considered before? Remember, the power of the reframe isn't just in solving problems. It's in discovering new opportunities that transform our approach to business and lead to breakthroughs we never imagined possible. So, to recap our talk today, here are some tools to help us to make better decisions, whether in life or in business. The first one is discovering the truth, not just what is true. The second is determining if satisficing is serving you well, and if you need to move beyond good enough in search of what is optimal. The third are there tools in your toolbox you've decided not to use? Is not using those tools helping you or hurting you? The fourth, discover some of your decision-making biases around uncertainty and develop tools and processes to help you to overcome them. The fifth and final one is reframing and understanding, as Shakespeare once said, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Thank you for joining me on Beyond the Office. I hope today's discussion inspires you to look at your decisions through a new lens and explore the endless possibilities that lie beyond the conventional. Until next time, keep on challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.